Andante Grazioso. The flooded ditches have sealed with ice. The morning light comes later and later, whispering and full of dark threads. I've decided to speak, to release certainty, to take winter's ravens as my rowdy clerics. The street lamps bend to the crown of frost I make, just by breathing. Cold snap. The simple arguments of juncos retract into the forest. The house settles in the hungry air, its short complaints plucking at our sleep. Frost climbs up the bedroom windows. This is the flora of our slumber, the bright boughs we breathe out in our dreams. The narrow light of morning, the wavering syllables of the radio, indigenous to the kitchen, where you fry bacon for our sandwiches, the rising bread that smells of nostalgia. Let's be an old couple someday, the visible and the invisible economies drifting between us. Maybe they're heart palpitations. Maybe it's a snowplow scraping the chip seal road. You are the only audience to my frailty. I want to be a winter person. I like the way it implies improvement. So cold it squared the truck's wheels and unstitched the long sleeves of our schedules. The sound of distant highways folded, then placed on the doorstep. Tell me how to breathe between the painful and the beautiful. My lips, my eyelids, slow with cold. Getting wood. It was late autumn. They needed a freezer full of meat, 4 cords split and stacked, to prepare themselves for the deep nights that would become the black, impenetrable mornings. At the woodlot, the children spilled out of the truck with their sandwiches and their laced boots, watched their father make the fierce and elegant gestures of the chainsaw, its stuttering, beautiful economy rupturing the thin blue afternoon. Then they loaded the trailer, felt the day's labor rest on their shoulders like a pelt, nodded at the clearing, the fine empty space they'd made, the congregation of stumps. They made it through to spring that way, duty sewn onto them like a button, until the afternoons were steeped with light. The quixotic sound of water dripping from the eaves, and discovering the dull carcass of the neighbor's cat emerging from the melting snowbank, realized tragedy could be raised to archaeological importance. They lost their obedience. They shucked their down vests, left the sour, woolly air of the house, and ran for the forest. Hunger licked by their perfect feral intentions, they dispersed like wood ash, the willow thickets glancing and shivering behind them. Johnson Lake, late August. You paddle tenderly through the chatter of paper-thin lake ice, while I cast and troll a line in the wake. This is what it's like to forgive and yet remember. Set a boat in the water, push it off from shore. Letter to my daughter. Vow. A hardscrabble climb up the hillside, the thin chorus of marmots raised by my footsteps. Once your small brow rests on my back, the good weight will hold me here until the sun hangs just below the mountains, casts light enough to find the way home. Aperture. No aurora tonight. The snowflakes admonish my eyelashes, my cheeks, while somewhere the moon arcs high over the clouds, searching. Degrees of existing. You are a pine needle in my teacup, a barnacle, a dust bunny, a thimbleful of decanted light, a minnow swimming in my cupped hands. Autumn equinox, second trimester. The cries of migrating geese trigger your kicks. The frost bites hard, the potato plants flop in astonishment. We dig buckets of new-skinned beets, strip the pea vines for the chickens. Dusk is a place where day and night emulsify. Swainson's thrush, porch light flicker. The river. We crossed over together, but only I knew it was a bridge, that there was nothing underneath, that it would not be there when I looked back. Nocturne. I'm sure delirium is an exotic flower, your small, hard cries, the sky peeling with rain. Naming. The real baby and the imagined baby. The real happiness, the imagined happiness. The real knowledge and the imagined knowledge. Is one complete without the other? There is a common story or grief between us, the smell of scalp, the smell of breast. Will you, with your blue-black eyes, watch the deepening shadows, the rising light of my face, and see me, perhaps, as I truly am, real and imagined? Linnea Borealis. My hands stroke the fine, lucid skin of your jerky limbs. Here's to hunger that's bigger than a body. Here's to the fierce petal of your tongue drawing down the milk. Berry picking. This is how it can begin. You were fresh as a new potato, tucked in my coat, my knees stained with cranberry, the black spruce creaking gently, stirred by the wind high above. A love so big I can only own a piece of it. My palms open to the sky, weighing the air, its possibilities. Mountain walking. These early mornings, ravens dismantle my dreams, dropping pine cones, then their quivering, watery questions, the tent translucent as an eyelid. Rustle of goose down, growl of sleeping bag zipper, sweat and wood smoke in Linnea's morning hair. Mountain heliotrope's slow acquisition of the rising sun. A slow walk between the crumholtz and dwarf birch, lichen painted scree to the lookout, where the soul tightens and pulls in the wind. Spaciously, this is the way the living walk after they pierce the firmament with their heads. Dust on my boots, a black stream edged with ice, and the whistle of the pika, so unadorned and fierce, it tugs at the sky where the crane's kettle, always on the verge of an alphabet. Perseids. The wasps hung their fine gray lanterns from the eaves. All summer we dined with them, their slow, ravenous orbits venerating the table. Wild notes coming to rest on the rim of a water glass, then the salmon, then the fruit. I've seen your hands pour tea from a silver thermos. Consider the cool handle of a sharp spade. Fix light to canvas with oil paint and brush. I've seen your hands fly out and flap wildly for a moment, then slip quietly into your hairline or your front pockets, all of it ending with a shrug or a grin. I am sweet-blooded, an apparition of calamine. You smudge the fire with fistfuls of grass, before we unfurl sleeping bags in the clearing of silver poplars. What light remains turns tender, apologetic. There is a dark, quick fluttering at the periphery, bats arriving, or parts of our dreams we forgot, remembered. The Capiz wind chimes drift and startle so many quiring moons. A pale moth, a kept promise, a piece of ash hovering, then rising from the fire. And everywhere, meteors shooting across the night sky, burning out in the atmosphere above us. Our eyes blinking, soft, returned to amazement. Riverine. Where the Nusutland grew shallow and swift, we rested our paddles on the gunnels, only dipping them to steer. We watched the riverbed, the astonishing velocity of the round green boulders passing beneath us, and the red-backed spawners slipping upstream through the shadows cast by clouds. And the kingfisher we startled into flight, gliding furtively from one sweeper to the next, while the small bruin raised its snout in the air and, catching our scent, turned back into the forest as we drifted by and around the bend. Every night the wolves called into the unreachable parts of us, and you laughed in your sleep. It wasn't your usual laugh. It belonged to the woman who walked naked into the river each morning, right to the top of her thighs, and sunk down, purposefully, kneeling on the soft gravel to bathe, to see every heartache suddenly flattened and carried away on the river's sun-scalloped surface, a driftwood fire blazing on the shore. Spring planting. Wood ash and bone meal. If this is an act of memory, you should start with the amendments. The sky is a little bleak. You feel a gray weight pressing behind your eyes. There is a root ball in burlap. There is a bucket of river water tugging at your arm. Kinnikinnick clipped with your spade. The ochre clay slick and cold and full of tree roots, ligatures that snap and pop as you step and pry. The blister comes quickly, then tears and stings much more than it should. Grief is a slow river, never freezing to the bottom. Grief is a good scavenger, locates the plangent songs of mourning, clean and white as gulls. Grief is a burled log, cut to length, polished and bright. It can hold up your porch roof for years, greet everyone who comes to the door. Grief is spooked horses in a storm, and you can't find your coat. Consider the erratic on the lawn. Now consider badminton and the erratic. Consider the lawn at romantic lengths and the prickly ambitions of wild rose and caragana. Consider clouds of leaf miner moths drifting like ash, and amidst it all, the blue spruce just planted, not asking if it's better to be new or ancient. It doesn't matter what you use to dig. It doesn't matter if it's an act of forgetting or remembering. The first mosquitoes are slow and easily persuaded by the soft, ambivalent gestures of your hands. The cliff swallows cut through the perfect dusk like stones on strings. The forest. A cold stream, a wooden cup. There was no question of where you would cross or where you would stop to drink. And still I ask, what brought you to me? The plain succour of my axe cleaving the distance? The mischief of new brome grass at your knees? The trees will count all the years we've lived, and then they will keep on counting, or fall down, or be felled, or burn standing, or in a stove. The fire a bright prayer, releasing carbon, all the words uttered, our first exhale and our last. There will be the things we have chosen to dwell upon, and the things we have chosen to forget, as well as the pine needles caught in your hair, our bodies cradled in cacophonies of wildflower and lichen. But first there will be intentions and mutability, a study of light and clouds through the treetops, the subtle ways to give ourselves completely, the passing corvid aware of its reputation for intelligence will fly over, clearing its throat.